The lecture hall was filled with students from different planets. They sat in rows waiting for class to begin. Most of them looked nervous. Today was going to be different from their normal lessons. Jake Morrison sat in the middle of the room. He was the only human in the class. His notebook was already full of drawings and notes from the past few weeks. The other students often stared at him. Some whispered about his teeth. Others moved away when he sat near them. Being a predator species made other students uncomfortable. Professor Vekrin walked to the front of the room. He was tall with silver scales and forearms. Everyone knew he was a strict teacher who liked to do unusual experiments. The room became quiet as he began to speak. "Today we will have a special lesson," Professor Vekrin said. His voice had a slight hissing sound. "You will learn about predator behavior by watching real predators." Many students shifted in their seats. Some of the furry Quilnari students near the front moved their chairs backward. They looked worried. "I am going to release 3 young Carvathi into this room," the professor continued. He touched some buttons on his desk. "These are baby apex predators from the Carvathi planet. They are young, but they still have all their hunting instincts. They can hide, work together as a team, and they know how to find prey." Jake leaned forward with interest. He had read about Carvathi before. They had 6 legs and dark blue fur with glowing stripes. They were strong and fast. "Very fascinating creatures. Your job is to stay calm and watch them," Vekrin explained. "Write down what they do. Notice which students they go near and why. This will teach you more than any book." The side door opened with a soft sound. 3 creatures ran into the room. They were about the size of large dogs but looked very alien. Their 6 legs moved in a smooth pattern. The glowing stripes on their bodies pulsed with soft light. Their eyes reflected the light with a silver shine. The students panicked. They pressed back in their seats. One Quilnari student actually climbed over 2 rows to get away. The air filled with the smell of fear from many different species. Jake stayed still. He watched with curiosity as the 3 cubs split up and started exploring the room. They moved like liquid, smooth and beautiful. The largest cub lifted its head and sniffed the air. All 3 cubs stopped moving at the same time. Then all 6 eyes from each cub locked onto one target. They all looked at Jake. Professor Vekrin's tail became stiff with surprise. In 15 years of doing this exercise, the cubs had never focused on one student so quickly. Usually they spent several minutes being confused by all the different species in the room. The 3 Carvathi cubs started walking up the stairs toward Jake. They never looked away from him. Students scrambled to get out of their way. They thought something terrible was about to happen. One student even pressed their emergency button. Jake watched them come closer. He stayed calm. He knew the cubs were supposed to be safe. They had been raised around people and were well fed. But he also knew that hunting instincts were strong. He kept his body relaxed and non-threatening. His breathing stayed steady. The largest cub reached him first. It climbed the last 2 stairs with powerful grace. It stopped at Jake's feet and tilted its head, studying him with smart eyes. Then it made a sound that shocked everyone, a chirp, high-pitched and almost playful. This sound was not in any of the books about Carvathi behavior. Jake slowly put out his hand, palm down. He let the cub smell him. The creature's nose was warm and slightly wet as it pressed against his fingers. It chirped again, clearly pleased. The glowing stripes on its body changed to a warmer blue color. Then the cub did something that made Professor Vekrin drop his tablet. It climbed into Jake's lap. The other 2 cubs saw this and immediately scrambled up too. Within seconds, Jake had 3 young apex predators fighting for space on his lap and legs. They chirped and nuzzled against him like oversized puppies wanting attention. "This is impossible," Vekrin whispered, but his microphone carried his words through the silent room. "Carvathi don't do this. They have never done this." Jake smiled as one of the smaller cubs licked his hand with a rough, warm tongue. He gently scratched behind its ear ridge. The cub's chirping got louder and its back leg kicked a little in pleasure. "Professor?" Jake called out, trying to manage the 3 excited predators that were now trying to climb his chest. "I think they like me." The lecture hall stayed frozen in shocked silence. The human that everyone had been nervous around, the predator species that made others uncomfortable, had become the favorite person of 3 creatures designed by nature to kill efficiently. Professor Vekrin slowly picked up his tablet. His training took over. "Class," he said, his voice slightly strained. "We have just seen something unprecedented. Begin taking notes. I want detailed observations. Mr. Morrison, please continue what you are doing. Jake laughed as the largest cub managed to lick the side of his face. It was very enthusiastic. I don't think I have much choice, Professor. They seem pretty determined. The other students began taking notes hesitantly. They were already forming theories about what they were seeing. Jake sat covered in predator cubs and realized that sometimes the best lessons were the ones nobody planned. The cubs settled down a bit after a few minutes. They stayed close to Jake, occasionally chirping when he stopped petting them. The largest one claimed his lap as its throne. The other two pressed against his sides. Mr. Morrison, Professor Vekrin said after a while, can you explain what you did to earn their trust? Jake thought about it. I didn't do anything special. I just stayed calm and let them come to me. I wasn't scared, so they weren't scared either. Animals can sense fear. If you're relaxed, they relax too. One of the Quilnari students raised a paw nervously. But they are predators. Aren't you afraid they might hurt you? Jake looked down at the cubs. One was now sleeping in his lap, making small snoring sounds. They're babies. Yes, they'll grow up to be dangerous hunters, but right now they're just kids wanting attention and affection. If you treat them with respect and kindness, they respond to that. The class continued for another hour. The cubs never left Jake's side. They played with him, learned simple commands from him, and showed everyone that predators could be gentle when treated with understanding. When class ended, the students filed out talking excitedly about what they had seen. Jake stayed behind to help return the cubs to their habitat. They whined when he tried to leave. I'll come back tomorrow, Jake promised them, scratching each one behind the ears. I promise. Professor Vekrin watched this interaction carefully. Something important had happened today, something that might change how the galaxy understood predators, and it had all started with a human who wasn't afraid. The video of Jake with the Carvathy cubs spread across the galaxy in hours. By the next morning, everyone at the Galactic Academy knew his name. The footage showed 3 apex predator cubs treating a human like a playground. It sparked debates in science departments on 17 different planets. Jake sat in Professor Vekrin's office feeling uncomfortable. The office was simple, with only certificates and preserved specimens in clear cases on the walls. Vekrin stood by the window looking down at the Academy's main plaza. His tail was swishing back and forth in agitation. I have been contacted by many people, Vekrin said without turning around. The department head, the dean, and 3 research institutes. All in the last 4 hours. Everyone wants to understand what happened in my classroom yesterday. I'm sorry if I caused problems, Professor, Jake said, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. Vekrin finally turned around. Jake was surprised to see curiosity on his face instead of anger. Problems? Mr. Morrison, you have contributed more to predator psychology in 5 minutes than some researchers do in their whole lives. He moved to his desk and brought up a holographic display. The cubs are still asking for you. They won't settle down. The handlers have never seen anything like it. The display showed the 3 Carvathy cubs in their enclosure. They were pacing near the door looking restless. Even through the video, Jake could see their glowing stripes pulsing in what seemed like agitation. I have been reading about Earth, Vekrin continued, showing several documents. Your species has a unique history with predators. You domesticated wolves. You keep apex predators as pets. There are cases of humans forming bonds with creatures that should see you as prey or competition. My family had dogs, Jake admitted. 3 of them. Growing up, I spent more time with them than with other kids. And how did you interact with these dogs? Jake shrugged. Like they were family, I guess. You play with them, train them, respect them, but also show them love. Dogs respond to calm confidence. If you're nervous, they get nervous. If you're relaxed, they relax. Vekrin's eyes widened slightly. You used pet psychology on Carvathy cubs. Creatures from a world you have never visited with biology completely different from Earth dogs. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds strange, Jake said with a small smile. But predators are predators, right? They respond to certain behaviors. Pack dynamics, body language, confidence without aggression. The cubs were probably confused by all the fear in the classroom. Then they found someone who wasn't afraid, who was calm and interested instead of threatening. The professor was quiet for a long moment. His tail stopped moving. The department head wants to create a research program. With your permission, of course. They want to understand how this works. There could be applications for wildlife management, conservation, even diplomacy with predator species. You want to study me? Jake asked. Not sure if he should be honored or worried. We want to study the interaction, Vekrin corrected, between humans and other predator species. Your species may have an intuitive understanding of predator psychology that other species lack. You evolved alongside apex predators. You competed with them. Sometimes you became them. The Xanthari's tone held respect. Most species in the galactic community evolved as prey animals. We developed intelligence to escape predators. Humans developed intelligence while being predators themselves. Jake thought about this. What would this research involve? Controlled interactions with various predator species, all documented and analyzed. Behavioral assessments. Comparison studies. Nothing dangerous, Vekrin added quickly. All supervised, all voluntary. The academy would give you extra credit toward your degree, and the research payment would be substantial. Through the window, Jake could see other students crossing the plaza. Some were pointing up at Vekrin's office. They had clearly recognized Jake from the video. His quiet life at the academy was definitely over. "Can I see the cubs again?" Jake asked. Vekrin's expression softened. They would certainly like that. The handlers are worried about their stress levels. An hour later, Jake was in the Xenobiology Department's secure habitat area. Professor Vekrin was with him, along with two handlers named Petrin and Dulnar. Both kept their distance from Jake, though they watched him with obvious fascination. "The cubs haven't eaten properly since yesterday," Petrin explained. Her fur rippled with worry. "They just sit by the door and make those sounds." "Chirping?" Jake asked. "Is that what you call it?" Dulnar rumbled. "We have never heard Karvathi make that sound before. It's not in any of the research documentation." The door to the habitat was made of reinforced transparent material, giving a clear view inside. As soon as the cubs saw Jake, all three rushed to the door. They pressed against it and made the chirping sounds that seemed to be just for him. "That's adorable," Jake murmured. "Adorable?" Petrin's translator carried her disbelief. "Those are apex predators. They will grow to be 2 meters tall at the shoulder. They can take down prey 3 times their size." "Sure, eventually," Jake agreed. "But right now they're basically puppies." "Can I go in?" The handlers looked at each other uncertainly. Vekrin nodded. "Open the door. Mr. Morrison, if you feel threatened at any moment, leave immediately. We will be watching." The door slid open and Jake stepped inside. The 3 cubs immediately swarmed him, chirping excitedly, climbing his legs, demanding attention. Jake laughed and sat down cross-legged on the floor. He let them investigate and play. The largest cub claimed his lap right away while the other 2 wrestled with his arms. Their play bites were carefully controlled. "Hello again," Jake said softly, scratching the largest cub behind its ear ridge. "Did you miss me? I'm sorry I left yesterday. I didn't know you would want me to stay." The cubs responded by chirping louder. The glowing stripes on their bodies shifted through various warm shades of blue and even touched purple. Petrin would later note that purple had never been documented in Karvathi cubs before. Jake spent the next hour in the habitat. The handlers watched in amazement as he played with the cubs, taught them simple commands like sit and stay, and even got them to eat their postponed meal by hand-feeding them while praising them. "This is going to change everything," Vekrin said quietly to the handlers. "If humans can form working relationships with apex predators from worlds they have never visited, the applications are endless." "It's not just that he's not afraid," Dulnar observed. "He genuinely likes them. He treats them with respect and affection at the same time. Most species do one or the other, not both." Petrin's fur rippled thoughtfully. "On my world, we avoid predators. We built our entire civilization around staying hidden from them. The idea of intentionally interacting with them, playing with them, is culturally unthinkable." "Humans are strange," Dulnar agreed. "Humans are fascinating," Vekrin corrected, making notes as Jake taught the cubs to high-five. They found this endlessly entertaining, and Mr. Morrison specifically may help us understand aspects of predator behavior we have been blind to because of our own evolutionary biases. Inside the habitat, Jake had started a game that looked like fetch using a rubber ball. The cubs were entranced. They chased the ball and brought it back to him, competing for the chance to be the one who delivered it. "You're all good at this," Jake praised them, accepting the ball and throwing it again. "Natural retrievers. Smart, too. Much smarter than people think, aren't you?" The cubs chirped their agreement, or at least that's how Jake interpreted it. As he watched them play, Jake felt something settle in his chest. A sense of purpose he hadn't found in his studies until now. These creatures, feared and respected and kept at a distance by most of the galaxy, responded to simple kindness and understanding. They didn't see him as just another prey species. They saw him as something else. They saw him as a friend. "Okay," Jake called out to the observation window. "I'm in. Whatever research program you want to set up, I'm in. These guys deserve better than being treated like dangerous specimens. They're people too, just a different kind." Through the window, he couldn't hear Vecron's response, but he saw the professor's tail lift in what he had learned with satisfaction. The cubs, sensing his attention had wandered, reminded him of their presence by all tackling him at once. Jake ended up laughing and buried under 3 chirping apex predators. The video of that moment would also go viral, and Jake's journey had only just begun. Within a week, Jake had become the most talked-about student at the academy. But not everyone was happy about it. The news called him the Predator Whisperer, and his videos were everywhere. Some people loved it. Others did not. Jake sat in the academy's hearing room facing a panel of 5 officials. They represented different species and departments. The room was designed to be neutral, with adjustable seating and lighting that worked for everyone. To Jake, it just made everything look slightly gray. Dean Hollister led the panel. She was an elderly Quilnari with silver-streaked fur. Her voice carried authority. "Mr. Morrison, this hearing was called because several faculty members and student groups have concerns about the research program." Jake had dressed in his formal academy uniform, but he still felt underdressed. "I understand, Dean. Some people," Hollister continued, "believe that using a predator species, specifically a human, to interact with other predators sends a dangerous message. They say it reinforces harmful stereotypes about species roles. It could lead to safety incidents." Another official spoke up. "There is also concern about the psychological impact on prey species students. Watching a predator bond with other predators may create an environment of fear." Jake frowned. "With respect, I think that's backward. The whole point is showing that predators aren't mindless killers." The cubs responded to kindness and respect, not aggression. "If anything, this proves that fear-based assumptions about predators are wrong." "Easy for a predator to say," muttered someone from the Student Safety Committee, loud enough to be heard. Dean Hollister gave them a warning look before turning back to Jake. "Mr. Morrison, no one is questioning your intentions. However, the Academy has a responsibility to all students. We must consider how this research might affect everyone." "Have there been actual complaints from students?" Jake asked. "Or is this theoretical?" A human voice spoke up, surprising Jake. Professor Linda Hayes from the Interspecies Relations Department leaned forward. She was one of only 3 human faculty members at the Academy. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, we received over 300 messages from students in the past week. About 70% support the research program. Many are from prey species students who found the interaction reassuring." The other officials looked surprised. "Reassuring?" one asked. Professor Hayes brought up a holographic display showing selected messages. Students commented that seeing Mr. Morrison treat the Carvathi cubs with such care changed their perception of predator species. Several Quilnari students specifically said they felt safer on campus after watching the videos. Their logic was that if a human can be gentle with apex predators, perhaps humans can be trusted around other species too. Jake hadn't expected that. He had been ready for accusations, not support. Dean Hollister reviewed the messages. Her fur rippled thoughtfully. "This is not what I expected." "What about the negative responses?" "About 20% are negative," Hayes continued. "Most from species with strong cultural taboos against predators. About 10% are simply concerned about safety, which is reasonable. The rest didn't offer clear positions." Another panel member spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. "This panel must also consider the benefits. The Galactic Academy is meant to foster understanding between species. If this research achieves that, we would be wrong to dismiss it." Professor Vecron spoke from where he sat in the observer section. "May I address the panel?" Dean Hollister nodded. Vecron approached with a data pad. 3 other institutions have already begun research based on Mr. Morrison's interaction with the Carvathi cubs. The Centaurus Institute successfully used similar techniques with a completely different predator species. A human researcher there formed a working relationship with thornback stalkers in half the time traditional methods require. Jake felt a surge of pride. The research was spreading. "Additionally," Vecron continued, "the Carvathi Homeworld Conservation Authority contacted me. They have been struggling with a conflict situation. Human colonists are having difficulties coexisting with wild Carvathi packs. Traditional methods haven't worked. They are asking if Mr. Morrison's approach might help. You want to send a student into a conflict zone? The student safety representative objected. I want to send a researcher to help solve a problem that has been deadlocked for 3 years, Vekrin corrected firmly. With proper supervision, safety protocols, and the student's consent. This is the purpose of applied research. Dean Hollister was quiet for a long time, reviewing documents. Finally, she looked up at Jake. Mr. Morrison, what do you want from this? Jake thought carefully. Honestly, Dean, I just want to help. I grew up being told that humans were dangerous, that we needed to be careful not to scare other species, that our nature as predators made us less somehow. Then I met these cubs, and they didn't care about any of that. They just responded to how I treated them. He paused. If I can help other people understand that predators aren't monsters, that we're all just trying to live our lives, then that seems worth doing. One official made an approving sound. Spoken with wisdom. The panel will deliberate, Dean Hollister announced. Mr. Morrison, you are dismissed. We will have a decision within 2 days. As Jake left the hearing room, Professor Hayes caught up with him in the corridor. That went better than I expected, she said quietly. Did you think they would shut it down? I wasn't sure. The Academy is progressive, but there is still cultural baggage around predator species, especially humans. She smiled. But you made a good case. The cubs respond to you in ways they don't respond to anyone else. Can I ask you something, Professor? Jake said. Does it bother you, being one of the few humans here? Always being aware that people see you as a predator first? Hayes was quiet for a moment. Every day, she admitted. But that's also why I stayed, why I teach here. Every student I help understand humans better. Every colleague who stops seeing me as a threat, that's progress. Slow, sometimes frustrating, but progress. She looked at him. You're doing more in a few weeks than I've managed in years. Don't underestimate the impact. They're just cubs, Jake said. They're apex predators responding to a human with affection and trust, Hayes corrected. That image is powerful. It challenges assumptions. That's always controversial, but it's also how things change. 2 days later, Jake received the panel's decision. The research program was approved with conditions: strict safety protocols, regular reviews, mandatory psychological evaluations for Jake, and a requirement that all research be published openly. The student representative had filed an objection but been overruled. Jake celebrated by visiting the cubs. They had learned to recognize his footsteps and would start chirping before he even reached their door. Spoiled, Jake told them affectionately, as they competed for his attention. You're all absolutely spoiled. The largest cub, who Jake privately called Blue because of her vivid glowing stripes, chirped and placed both front paws on Jake's chest. Yeah, I missed you too, Jake murmured, scratching her neck. And guess what? We get to keep doing this. Make it official. What do you think? Blue's response was to lick Jake's face enthusiastically, which Jake took as approval. From the observation room, Vekrin watched and made notes. He wrote that the cubs showed clear preference for human interaction. He recommended expanding the research to include other predator species. If results were consistent, this could revolutionize understanding of interspecies dynamics. In the habitat, Jake played fetch with 3 chirping apex predators and felt more at home than he had since arriving at the academy. His journey was just beginning, but he was ready for whatever came next. 3 months after the hearing, Jake found himself on a transport ship heading to the Carvathi homeworld. Professor Vekrin sat across from him, looking at data on a holographic display. 2 Carvathi wildlife experts named Norath and Kelvik sat behind them. They had been skeptical about a human student joining the mission until they watched the videos. Now they were just curious. The situation is delicate, Norath explained for the 3rd time. Her growling speech came through the translator as flat clinical sentences. The human colony of New Landing established themselves near traditional Carvathi pack territory. The packs are protecting their hunting grounds. The humans need space for farms and development. Both sides have been increasingly aggressive. Has anyone been hurt? Jake asked. 2 colonists injured, 1 Carvathi killed, Kelvix rumbled. His translator had a slightly different tone, making him sound formal. The humans used sonic devices that work well on most predators, but cause Carvathi severe pain. In response, a pack raided the colony's livestock pens. The situation gets worse. Jake looked out the viewport at the stars. And you think I can help? We think a demonstration might help both sides understand each other, Vekran said. The colonists see the Karvathi as mindless beasts. The Karvathi see the humans as invaders who bring pain. If we can show them interacting peacefully, it might open communication. No pressure, Jake muttered. Norath made a sound the translator couldn't render. You formed bonds with cubs raised in captivity. These are wild Karvathi, unaccustomed to any species but their own. The dynamics will be different, but the basic psychology should be similar, right? Jake said. Pack dynamics, body language, respect. In theory, Kelvix agreed. But theory and practice differ in the field. They arrived at New Landing just before local sunset. The colony was smaller than Jake expected. Maybe 200 buildings clustered around a central square, surrounded by farm fields that spread toward distant forests. The buildings were standard human colonial design. Governor Patricia Wells met them at the landing pad. She was in her 50s with the weathered look of someone who had spent years on frontier worlds. Her handshake was firm, her expression guarded. Professor Vekran, welcome. Though I'll be honest, I'm not sure what a student and experts are going to accomplish that our security team hasn't tried. She glanced at Jake. No offense, kid. None taken, Jake replied. I'm not sure either, but we would like to try. Wells led them to the administration building. A holographic map displayed the territory. Red markers showed conflict sites. Blue markers showed human settlements. Green markers represented known Karvathi pack territories. The main pack is here, Wells indicated green markers. About 30 individuals led by an alpha female we call Alpha 1. They have been increasingly bold, coming closer to our perimeter. We have had to use the sonic devices 12 times in the past month. Jake studied the map. The Karvathi territory was being squeezed on 3 sides by human development. Where do they hunt? These valleys, Wells pointed. But we need to clear those areas for crop expansion. The soil is ideal, water access is good. We offered to relocate the pack, but we can't exactly negotiate with wild animals. With respect, Governor, Norath interjected. Karvathi are not simple animals. They have complex social structures, communication methods, territorial agreements with other packs. They are people, just not people who use technology. Wells sighed. I understand that in theory, but in practice, they are stopping us from building the colony we need to survive. Earth spent a lot of money establishing New Landing. We can't just abandon it because local wildlife is inconvenient. Jake could feel the frustration on both sides. The humans needed land. The Karvathi needed territory. Without communication, conflict was inevitable. What if we could establish communication? Jake asked. How? Wells looked skeptical. They don't have language we can translate. They have body language, Jake countered. Social cues. Pack dynamics. At the academy, the cubs responded to those. Maybe wild packs would too. You want to walk up to wild apex predators and hope they don't see you as lunch? Wells shook her head. I can't authorize that. Too dangerous. What if I went with him? Kelvix suggested. I'm Karvathi. The pack would be less threatened by my presence. If the human demonstrates peaceful intent while under the protection of one of their own kind, it might work differently. Norath's fur rippled in agreement. It could work. Karvathi understand pack structures. If Kelvix presents the human as part of his pack, under his protection, they might accept the approach. Vekran was making notes rapidly. We would need strict protocols, monitoring equipment, emergency extraction plans, but the logic is sound. Wells looked at them like they had lost their minds. You're serious about this? Governor, Jake said carefully, what's the alternative? Keep escalating until someone gets killed. The Karvathi were here first. They have just as much right to this world as the colonists. There has to be a better way. The governor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. All right, but we do this carefully. Full medical team on standby. Security monitoring from a distance. And at the first sign of aggression, we pull you out. Understood? Understood, Jake agreed, trying to ignore his nervous stomach. That night, Jake stood on the colony's perimeter, looking at the dark forest where the pack lived. Somewhere out there, Alpha 1 and her pack were going about their lives, unaware that a human was planning to walk into their territory tomorrow. Nervous? Professor Vekran asked, joining him at the fence. Terrified, Jake admitted. The cubs at the academy were one thing. This is completely different. Fear is wisdom, Vekran said. It means you understand the risks. But I have watched you with the cubs for 3 months now, Mr. Morrison. You have an instinct for this. Trust it. What if I'm wrong? What if the cubs only responded because they were raised around other species? What if wild Carvathi just see me as prey? Then we extract you immediately and try a different approach, Vekran said simply. But I don't believe that will happen. You treat predators with respect that most species cannot manage. You see them as equals, not as threats or specimens. That authenticity comes through in everything you do. The professor's tail swished thoughtfully. Besides, the cubs were still predators with all their instincts. You won those instincts over with patience and understanding. Tomorrow you will have the chance to do it again. Jake took a deep breath of the alien air. It was surprisingly similar to Earth's atmosphere, just slightly more oxygen-rich. Everything felt sharper, more vivid. Okay, he said quietly. Let's see if this works. In the forest, Alpha 1 settled down with her pack for the night. She had noticed the strange, painful sounds from the human settlement had stopped recently. That was good. But the humans were still there, still taking territory, still spreading their scent across lands that had belonged to her pack for generations. Tomorrow, she would lead a hunt, show her strength, remind the invaders that this was Carvathi land. Neither Jake nor Alpha 1 knew it yet, but tomorrow would change everything for both of them. Dawn broke over New Landing with beautiful light. Jake stood at the edge of the forest with Kelvix. They both carried minimal gear. The theory was that appearing non-threatening required actually being non-threatening. That meant no weapons, no heavy equipment, just two individuals walking into the territory of wild apex predators. Last chance to reconsider, Kelvix rumbled. His glowing stripes were pulsing a steady, calm blue. Jake had learned that Carvathi used these patterns to show emotion and communicate. I'm good, Jake lied. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. How do we find them? We don't, we let them find us. Kelvix started walking into the forest. We walk into their territory, show no aggression, and wait. They will come to investigate. The forest was beautiful in a way that made Jake's throat tight. Trees that looked like earth pines but with bark that shimmered with subtle colors. Ground cover that crunched softly under their feet, releasing a scent like cinnamon and rain. Sounds of creatures moving in the trees above. Alien birds calling to each other. They walked for 20 minutes before Kelvix stopped. Here, this is the heart of their territory. See the marking trees? Jake looked where Kelvix indicated. Several trees had deep scratches, and the distinctive scent of Carvathi marked the area. They know we're here. They have known since we entered the forest. Now we wait. They settled down in a small clearing, sitting on the ground in a deliberately non-threatening posture. Jake kept his breathing steady, his body language open and relaxed. This was it. Everything he had learned from the cubs, all the theory and practice now came down to whether wild Carvathi would respond the same way. The forest around them went quiet. That universal sign that something dangerous was nearby. Then the pack emerged from the trees. 10 Carvathi, moving in that liquid, coordinated way that made Jake's instincts scream danger, even as his mind marveled at their beauty. They were larger than the cubs, fully grown, their glowing stripes shifting through patterns Jake didn't understand yet. All eyes were fixed on the intruders. Alpha 1 was unmistakable. She was the largest, her stripes the brightest, and she moved with authority that the others deferred to. She approached first, stopping about 10 meters away, head low and eyes assessing. Kelvix spoke in the growling language of the Carvathi. His translator didn't render it for Jake, but the meaning seemed clear. Introduction, explanation, request for peaceful contact. Alpha 1's response was a deep rumbling that made the air vibrate. She asks why we bring a human. Kelvix translated quietly. She says humans bring pain. Jake slowly raised his hands, palm out. The universal gesture of peace. Then he spoke, knowing Alpha 1 couldn't understand his words, but hoping she would understand his tone. I'm sorry for what my people have done. I'm not here to cause pain. I want to help. Alpha 1 tilted her head, studying him. Then she made a gesture Jake recognized from working with the cubs. A pack greeting, an invitation to approach, but also a test. She's giving you permission to come closer, Kelvix murmured. But be careful. This is a test. Jake slowly stood and took 3 steps forward, then sat back down. Closer, but not threateningly so. Not claiming dominance. Just accepting the invitation. One of the younger pack members chirped. The sound was identical to what the cubs made when they were pleased. Jake couldn't help but smile. Alpha One's body language showed surprise at that sound. "Your young make that sound for me too," Jake said, keeping his tone gentle. "At the academy, the Cubs and I became friends. They trust me. I hope maybe you could too." Alpha One moved closer. Jake's every instinct screamed at him to back away. She was massive up close, all muscle and predatory power. But he held still, let her investigate his scent, waited for her decision. She made a low rumbling sound. Then, to Jake's shock, she sat down in front of him. "She says you smell like young ones," Kelvix translated, his own surprise evident. "She says you carry their trust." She asked what you want. This was the moment. Jake took a breath. "The humans at the colony don't understand your people. They see you as animals. I want to show them you're more than that. But for that to work, there needs to be peace. Can we find a way to share this world?" Alpha One looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and made a series of sounds to her pack. Several responded, their body language animated. A discussion was happening, one Jake couldn't follow. Finally, Alpha One turned back to Jake. She extended one massive paw, claws retracted, and placed it gently on Jake's knee. A gesture of trust, of acceptance. Then she chirped, the same sound the Cubs made. The sound of pleasure, of recognition, of connection. Jake felt tears sting his eyes. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and placed his hand over her paw. "Thank you," he whispered. What followed was 3 hours of the most incredible experience of Jake's life. The pack accepted his presence, investigated him with curiosity rather than aggression. He played with the pack's juveniles who were fascinated by him. He sat with Alpha One while Kelvix translated, and they worked out a basic understanding. The pack didn't want conflict. They were willing to share territory if the humans would stop the painful sounds and respect the pack's core hunting grounds. They asked for recognition, for understanding that this was their home too. When Jake and Kelvix finally walked back to the colony, Alpha One and 2 pack members accompanied them to the tree line. A gesture of good faith. Governor Wells nearly fainted when she saw wild Carvathi approaching the colony peacefully, with Jake walking calmly among them. The negotiations that followed were complex. They involved scientists, colonial authorities, Carvathi experts, and Kelvix as translator. But the foundation had been laid. The Carvathi understood the humans were people, not just invaders. The humans understood the Carvathi were people, not just wildlife. Agreements were reached. Territory was shared. The sonic devices were dismantled and replaced with simple boundary markers that both species could understand. The colony adjusted its expansion plans to avoid the core hunting grounds. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings, conflicts to resolve. But it was a beginning. 6 months later, Jake sat in the Academy's amphitheater, defending his thesis to a room full of professors and students. The title displayed behind him read, Interspecies Communication and Conflict Resolution, a Case Study in Human Carvathi Relations. The 3 cubs, now significantly larger, sat at his feet. Blue rested her head on his leg while the other 2 dozed peacefully. The audience had stopped finding this strange. Jake concluded his presentation with a simple statement. "We assume that predators are dangerous, that different species can't coexist, that fear and separation are the only answers. But what if we're wrong? What if the real answer is something simpler? Respect, understanding, the willingness to see others as people regardless of how different they are from us." He looked down at Blue, who chirped softly and nuzzled his hand. "These 3 taught me that." Alpha One and her pack confirmed it. "We're all just trying to live our lives, protect our families, find our place in the universe. When we remember that, when we approach each other with empathy instead of fear, amazing things can happen." The defense concluded with unanimous approval. Professor Vekran actually smiled, which several students would later swear was the first time they had seen it. That night, at the celebration, Jake found himself surrounded by students from a dozen different species, all wanting to talk to him, to hear about his experiences, to understand his work. The fear that had kept others away in his first days at the academy had transformed into curiosity, respect, even admiration. Professor Hayes found him on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You did good work, Jake, really good work." "I just showed people that predators aren't monsters," Jake said. "Doesn't seem like it should have been that revolutionary." Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are the simplest ones. Hayes replied. You've changed how a lot of people think about predator species, about humans. That matters more than you know. Blue appeared at Jake's side, having followed him from the party. She was nearly full-grown now, large enough that her head reached his chest. She chirped and leaned against him. I know, Jake said, scratching behind her ear. You want attention. You always want attention, Hayes laughed. What's next for you? I hear there are 3 different research institutions offering positions. I haven't decided yet, Jake admitted. There's a colony having similar issues with native predators, and the Borean Concordat requested a consultation about their wildlife preservation programs. Lots of options. Good problems to have, Hayes observed. Jake looked down at Blue, then out at the stars beyond. You know what the weird thing is? I came to the academy just wanting to study alien life. Never thought I would end up being the bridge between species. Maybe that's exactly what humanity is meant to be, Hayes suggested. We evolved alongside predators. We understand them in ways other species can't. Maybe that's our role in the galactic community, not as warriors or threats, but as translators, helping others understand the dangerous things they fear. Blue chirped and climbed partially into Jake's lap, despite being far too large for it. Jake adjusted to accommodate her, laughing. Well, if this is my job, I could do worse. From the party inside, the sound of multiple species celebrating together,